It's a real pleasure to join your conference, and hopefully the next time we have one of these, it can be in person. But I recognise the constraints that face us all around the world at the moment. And my name is Nicholas Talbot. I am the Chief Executive of IVSC. For those of you that don't know us, we have a couple of key aims. One is really around having standards in place, high quality, consistent standards in place for all forms of valuation that are used everywhere in the world. And the other key component that we look to encourage is very much around professionalism, because we can put the best standards in place, but unless you've got professionalism there in each country, then actually it's meaningless. So we look very much to work in partnership with different countries, different organisations and different individuals. But what's the point of having an international approach? And when I think about this, I actually tend to think about sport. And normally I'd use football as an example, but recognising I have a slightly different audience here, I think I'd use cricket, although I know it might confuse any of my American friends that might be on this too. But imagine if every country in the world that played cricket had different rules, and a different approach. We would have no idea who was ahead, who was winning, who the best team in the world at cricket is. Now, imagine international investment. Do you really want to have to understand 195 different approaches to financial reporting or to valuing an asset, whether you're looking at it from an investment point of view or indeed whatever point of view you need a valuation for? Ultimately, this is a competition for inward investment, for FDI, and investors want confidence. They get that from quality internationally defined approaches, as well as strong local professionalism. Now, all of that said, frankly, I think there must be something wrong with the international approach to cricket at the moment, because when I looked up the rankings earlier today, expecting to see the Indian cricket team at number 1, I was surprised to see New Zealand at the top, and except, of course, for 2020, where it was England. So I think the format for 2020 is still actually fine. In terms of how we work, we look to bring together an international approach by taking the best ideas from wherever they are in the world. And we crudely split the world into 3, so tangible assets, business valuation and intangibles, and more recently, financial instruments. And we're looking very much to have a collaborative approach. So we work with other standard setters, such as IASB, FASB, IAASB, professional bodies, major corporates, either national or international, some of the biggest banks in the world, some of the biggest investors in the world, as well as data providers, auditors. So we really look to bring together the whole ecosystem. And our boards have India representation. And in fact, when I look at the organisation that we've developed, we have over 170 members and sponsors from around the world, and 13 of those member organisations actually come from India at the moment. So quite an influential representation from your part of the world. That said, if any of you want to get involved, you're always welcome. We welcome applications to apply to be on these boards every time we open them. And we really look to get the best talent from anywhere that it is in the world. So we really want to get your views and input. And shortly on the panel, you'll hear from Mark Zeiler, who chairs our Standards Review Board. And that board oversees all of the different approaches that we have, the specialist approaches to tangible assets, business valuation, intangibles, and financial instruments. I think that the COVID situation, the health crisis that has been so tragic for all of us, is obviously developed into an economic crisis of sorts, and countries are starting to emerge at different paces. And we've done things to help on that in terms of what to do in times of uncertainty. But actually, we've noticed more and more interest in having that globally consistent approach to valuation. Now more than ever, the role of a quality valuer is really important in terms of restoring confidence to investors and economies around the world as the world starts to emerge from the COVID crisis that we've seen. One of the recent groupings that we've put together is bringing together some of the world's biggest investors into an investors forum that we have. And we've also got a grouping, a valuation working group with some of the leaders of some of the world's most influential regulators. And actually there are some strong themes that come from both, in that both want to see global quality and consistency. And they need that not just in each local financial system, but actually at a comparable level, country to country. So that's something that's really important, unsurprisingly, I would say. And hopefully the steps that India has been taking will build towards that as well on a local level. ESG, this won't be a surprise to you, but obviously this is something that's hugely important to every one of us, every country, as we look to avoid the climate crisis becoming bigger and bigger. But in terms of practical steps, I think we're going to see more impact from what will be the Sustainability Standards Board, which is being created by the IFRS Foundation. And that will obviously have a reporting impact, and it will drive the behavior, I think, of some of the market participants. And that's strongly supported by the UN, IOSCO, organizations like that. And I think that will obviously have an impact. At the moment, the investors that I speak to, they see the qualitative information that's out there, and some of them really have a strong urge to participate. But from a valuation point of view, what they really want to do is understand the quantitative impact. So if it's climate change, well, actually, you know, if you invest in a beer factory, will it have a water table there in 10 years' time? If you're buying beachfront properties in Miami, you know, how do you factor in things like the rising sea levels? So there are lots of very reasonable but clever questions out there. And one of the things that we're working to do is bring together stakeholders so that we can evolve the standards to try and answer some of these tricky questions that are out there and play the role that is needed, because with whatever reporting system the world comes up with, valuation is going to be a key factor in that. And actually the value of different assets is going to be a key driver, I think, in behavior in terms of ESG and trying to actually make improvements towards that. And as we see increased regulation around the world, that will also obviously have another key impact. I'm now going to open up and hand over to what is an exciting and interesting panel 2 on valuation, which brings together some very distinguished speakers from across the world. So I thank you, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of today's conference.